A video clip appeared online last October, posted across multiple forums and social media accounts within hours. The footage was grainy, only about 15 seconds long, but what it showed stopped me cold. Hunters in Michigan wilderness standing over the body of something that should not exist. The creature was massive, easily 7 feet tall, even lying sprawled across the forest floor, covered in dark matted fur with a canine head that stretched far beyond any wolf or bear. One hunter held the jaws open to display rows of vicious teeth. Another posed with his rifle and a grin that made my stomach turn. Within 24 hours, the footage had millions of views and thousands of comments arguing whether this was real or the most elaborate hoax in cryptid history. I have spent years documenting cryptid encounters, listening to witnesses describe things that defy explanation. I have heard Dogman accounts from credible people with nothing to gain from lying. But this footage struck me differently. If real, if these hunters had actually tracked and killed a Dogman and posed with its body like a trophy deer, we were witnessing something far worse than just another encounter. We were witnessing the destruction of something rare and intelligent, something that has survived by learning to avoid us. So before we go further, make sure you subscribe and let us know where you are watching from. Thanks. The original posts came from 3 different accounts. One claimed to be from the hunter himself, identifying only as being from Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Another was posted by someone who said they received the clip from a friend who knew the hunting party. The third appeared on a cryptid forum with no attribution, just the footage and a location marker for Huron National Forest. Within hours, the accounts began deleting everything. The video disappeared from original sources, but by then it had been downloaded and reposted thousands of times. Screenshots circulated. People enhanced frames, zoomed in on details, analyzed every pixel. The forums exploded. Some argued the creature was clearly a bear shot at an unfortunate angle. Others pointed out the proportions were wrong for any known bear species, that the snout was too elongated, the legs too human-like in their joints, the fur pattern inconsistent with anything in scientific records. Digital forensics experts analyzed the frames for manipulation. Some claimed to find evidence of editing. Others found nothing and argued the footage was either authentic or created with extraordinary skill. What struck me most was not the authenticity debate, but comments from people who lived in that region. Dozens of accounts described their own encounters. A woman near Mio talked about hearing howls in winter 2019 that did not sound like wolves, howls that seemed to form communication patterns across miles of forest. A hunter described finding massive canine prints near the Osable River in 2021, over 8 inches long, appearing to come from something walking upright based on stride length and depth. A park ranger posted anonymously about an incident from 2018 where campers reported seeing a large bipedal figure moving through their site at night. When he investigated the next morning, he found a deer carcass torn apart with what looked like both claws and teeth, bones broken and marrow extracted. The carcass was hung 8 feet high in a tree, positioned in a way that seemed almost ritualistic. He filed a report attributing it to a bear, but admitted he had never seen a bear capable of that. These accounts painted a picture of something living in northern Michigan forests for decades or longer. Indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes have stories going back centuries. The Odawa spoke of the Wendigo, a creature that walked like a man but had the head of a wolf and insatiable hunger. The Ojibwe told stories of shapeshifters existing in liminal spaces between natural and supernatural worlds. French trappers in the 1700s wrote about creatures they called loup-garou, werewolves hunting deep forests far from settlements. Modern sightings follow consistent patterns. Witnesses describe creatures between 6 and 8 feet tall with broad shoulders and powerful builds. The head is distinctly canine with elongated snout and pointed ears, but eyes positioned forward like a predator hunting by sight. Fur described as dark, usually black or deep brown, sometimes gray around face and chest. The hands have fingers with claws rather than paws, capable of grasping and manipulating objects. The legs are digitigrade, walking on toes like a dog, but joints suggest ability to stand and move upright for extended periods. Most encounters happen at night or twilight. The creatures avoid direct confrontation, preferring to observe from distance or flee when discovered. But there are accounts of aggressive behavior when cornered or when territory is threatened. Hunters report being followed for miles, hearing footsteps that matched their pace and stopped when they stopped. Campers wake to find supplies disturbed and large prints circling tents. Direct attacks are rare and disputed. The 1987 Luther, Michigan case became one of the most documented Dogman incidents. A conservation officer investigated livestock killings and found evidence of systematic hunting suggesting intelligence rather than random predation. Kills were clean and efficient, targeting specific animals and avoiding properties with dogs or heavy human activity. Tracks showed large canine prints alongside what looked like barefoot human tracks, as if the creature alternated between bipedal and quadrupedal movement. The officer never officially identified anything other than a large wolf, but years later admitted in a radio interview he had seen the creature himself. He watched it cross a logging road at dusk, moving on two legs with a loping gait that covered ground with disturbing speed. When it reached the tree line, it dropped to all fours and disappeared in seconds. He followed tracks into the trees with his spotlight, but the creature had vanished completely. With that history in mind, I watched the footage with growing unease. The clip had been posted without context initially, just the video with vague captions about a successful hunt. But as it spread and people demanded explanations, more details emerged. According to accounts claiming to know the hunters, the incident occurred in early October near Huron National Forest. A group of 5 hunters had been tracking what they thought was a large wolf-killing deer in the area. They set up trail cameras and found footage of something moving through forest at night, walking upright with a canine profile. The hunters reportedly spent 3 days tracking the creature, following unusual prints, territorial markings on trees too high for any normal wolf, and remains of kills showing evidence of tool use. One deer had been skinned with deliberate cuts rather than random tearing. Another kill site showed bones broken systematically to extract marrow, split lengthwise with precision, implying either tools or incredible jaw strength combined with intelligence. On the 4th day, according to accounts, hunters found the creature in a ravine feeding on a recent kill. They claimed it charged when discovered, moving with speed that gave no time to retreat. Multiple shots were fired. The creature was hit several times but continued charging until a final shot brought it down less than 20 feet away. The accounts emphasized self-defense, that they had not intended to kill but had no choice. They described the silence that followed, standing over this impossible thing trying to process what they were looking at. That is the story as told online. I do not know if any is true. What I know is the footage exists and shows something demanding explanation. I downloaded the highest resolution version and examined it frame by frame. The creature defied easy categorization. The head was unmistakably canine with long snout and visible fangs, but skull structure seemed heavier than any wolf. The ears were pointed and set high, appearing alert. The musculature visible under fur, particularly in shoulders and upper arms, was not the lean build of a wolf or stocky power of a bear. This was something designed for both strength and agility. The hands were the most disturbing detail. In one frame, you could see the creature's right hand clearly, fingers slightly curled. The fingers were long and ended in curved claws, but the overall structure was too human-like to dismiss. There was a thumb, clearly opposable, positioned where a human thumb would be. The palm showed pads similar to a dog's paw, but fingers had joints and proportions suggesting dexterity beyond any known canine. This creature could grip. It could manipulate objects, it could use tools. But what angered me, what made me physically sick watching this footage, was not the creature itself, but the hunters' faces. They were smiling. The hunter kneeling beside the body had a broad grin, the expression you see in photos of successful deer hunters with prize catches. His hand rested on the creature's shoulder in casual ownership, as if this were just another animal conquered and displayed. Another hunter stood giving a thumbs up, rifle slung over shoulder, expression of satisfaction and pride. This is what I cannot reconcile. Even accepting they acted in self-defense, even granting the creature charged and they had genuine fear, the footage was recorded after danger passed, after time to process what they killed, and their response was not horror or awe or scientific curiosity. Their response was to pose for trophy shots, to smile and gesture as if they had accomplished something worth celebrating. To me, that speaks to something deeply wrong in how we approach the unknown and rare. Let me be clear. I believe Dogman is real. I have listened to too many credible witnesses describing too many consistent details to dismiss them as mistakes or lies. I believe these creatures are intelligent, possibly as intelligent as humans in their own way. I believe they are rare, perhaps critically so, survivors who have learned to hide because they understand we are the greatest threat to their existence. And I believe if this footage is genuine, if these hunters really tracked and killed a dogman, they have committed an act beyond sport hunting or self-defense. They have killed something irreplaceable. I searched for additional footage for weeks. I contacted accounts that posted the clip, sent messages through forums, offered to pay for access. Most never responded. One replied saying additional footage had been deleted for legal reasons, though they did not specify what those were. Another claimed files became corrupted and could not be recovered. A third simply said they had been advised not to share anything further. The vague excuses felt like deflection, but I could not prove anything. I tried tracing origins through reverse searches and metadata analysis. The files had been stripped of most metadata, but traces remained. The clip appeared shot on a phone camera based on resolution and artifacts. Timestamps, where recoverable, were consistent with early October in Michigan, based on vegetation and shadow angles. Analyzing background details became an obsession. The trees appeared to be mixed hardwoods, oak and maple primarily, with pine in distance. Leaves showed autumn colors, yellows and oranges with green, consistent with early October in northern Michigan. But footage can be manipulated. I needed more than analysis. I needed to understand who these hunters were and whether their story held together. The problem was they had gone silent immediately after initial posts. No interviews, no follow-up explanations, no attempts to prove claims or defend against hoax accusations. They had shown the world something extraordinary and disappeared. Some interpreted the silence as proof of guilt, evidence the footage was fake. But I considered another possibility. Perhaps silence was strategic. Perhaps they realized proving their story would require revealing identities, facing scrutiny from law enforcement and wildlife authorities, potentially facing legal consequences for killing an unrecognized species. I spoke with a wildlife biologist who has worked in Michigan forests for 20 years. I showed him frames from the footage without explaining what they supposedly depicted. He studied them for several minutes in silence. Finally, he said he could not identify it with certainty. The canine features were obvious, but proportions were wrong for any wolf subspecies he knew. The size was beyond anything documented. The musculature did not match known predators. When I told him it claimed to show a dogman kill, he shook his head slowly. If the footage was real, we were looking at something that would rewrite our understanding of North American megafauna. I asked about the hands specifically, whether any known animal could have that digit structure. He showed me comparative anatomy references on his computer, hands of bears, primates, various canines. None matched exactly. Bear paws have fingers but lack opposable thumb and visible proportions. Primate hands have dexterity but lack claws and overall structure. Canine paws are completely different, lacking individual fingers entirely. He told me if someone created this as a hoax, they did remarkable work on anatomical plausibility. If real, we were looking at something that did not fit current taxonomic frameworks. The more I investigated, the more frustrated I became with lack of concrete information. Hunters remained anonymous. Location was vague enough to prevent field investigation. I was left with seconds of footage and stories that might or might not connect to the same incident, yet I could not dismiss it. Something about the clip felt genuine in a way obvious hoaxes do not. The creature looked heavy and real, its weight pressing into forest floor matching lighting and perspective. The fur appeared natural with variations in color and texture, requiring significant effort to fabricate convincingly. 3 months after the initial posts, new information emerged. Someone claiming to be a friend of one hunter posted a detailed account on a hunting forum. According to this source, the footage was real, but the self-defense story was not. Hunters had deliberately sought the creature after seeing trail camera evidence. They baited an area with deer carcasses and waited in elevated stands, same technique used for bears. The dogman approached bait on the fourth night, moving cautiously and circling several times before committing to feed. The account described remarkably intelligent behavior. It approached from downwind to avoid scent detection. It paused frequently to listen and scan. It even looked directly at the tree stand where hunters waited, though whether it could see them in darkness was unclear. When it finally began feeding, it ate methodically, pausing to raise its head and check surroundings every few bites. Hunters took the shot when the creature focused on meat, multiple rifles firing simultaneously to ensure a quick kill. This account, if true, changed everything. It meant hunters had not stumbled into danger, but created it deliberately. They had turned a rare intelligent creature into bait-driven prey. The self-defense narrative was a cover story, justification when they realized how controversial it would be. I tried verifying this account, but hit the same walls. The poster would not identify themselves or provide checkable details. The story could not be confirmed or denied, but it fit with other details I had pieced together. I contacted cryptid researchers who had studied Dogman reports for decades. Most were skeptical for the same reason they are skeptical of most cryptid evidence. Physical proof is extraordinarily rare, and when it appears, it almost always turns out to be misidentification or fabrication. One researcher pointed out that if hunters really killed a dogman, the smart move would have been contacting scientists or wildlife authorities immediately, documenting everything properly and preserving the body. Taking trophy footage and posting online suggested either incredible foolishness or they knew it was not what it appeared and were creating a viral hoax. But another researcher had a different perspective. She had spent years interviewing dogman witnesses and developing relationships with indigenous communities in Michigan and Wisconsin. She told me that in many communities, killing a dogman would be considered an act of profound spiritual significance, not something to advertise or celebrate. The creatures are viewed as sacred or as warnings, beings existing at boundaries between natural and supernatural worlds. To kill one would invite misfortune, and to boast would compound the offense. She suggested if the footage was real, hunters were probably not from local communities holding these beliefs. They were likely outsiders from southern Michigan or other states, people who heard stories and decided to prove them through force. The fact they posted the clip online then quickly deleted it suggested they had not anticipated the reaction scale, had not understood killing something this significant would provoke genuine anger from people viewing these creatures as worthy of protection and respect. I began noticing a pattern in online discussions. While many argued about authenticity, there was a smaller but vocal group angry regardless. They argued even if the footage was fake, creating it normalized the idea of hunting dogmen, made it seem acceptable rather than destruction of something rare and valuable. They pointed to history of species driven to extinction by hunters who saw animals only as trophies or threats. The passenger pigeon, the eastern elk, the sea mink, all hunted into oblivion before we recognized what we were losing. If Dogman exists, these critics argued, it probably exists in very small numbers scattered across isolated wilderness pockets. Each individual would be precious from a conservation standpoint, a remnant of something ancient trying to survive in a world increasingly hostile to large predators. To hunt and kill one, whether in self-defense or deliberately, would potentially push the species closer to extinction, and to celebrate that act with trophy footage would reveal a profound failure of human responsibility toward the natural world. I found myself agreeing more than I wanted to admit. I have always tried maintaining objectivity in research, documenting reports without inserting my own feelings or agendas, but this footage pushed me beyond objectivity into something personal. I looked at that grinning hunter and felt disgust. I looked at the creature's body and felt grief, even though I could not be certain it was real. And I looked at comments celebrating the kill, people calling hunters heroes for taking down a dangerous predator, and I felt deep frustration at how quickly we reduce everything to categories of threat and conquest. I thought about what would happen if footage were definitively proven authentic. Would authorities attempt recovering the body? Would scientists descend on the area searching for more evidence? Would the forest become flooded with hunters hoping to claim their own Dogman trophy? The implications terrified me. I imagined a species surviving thousands of years through intelligence and caution, suddenly exposed and vulnerable. I imagined remaining individuals fleeing deeper into whatever wilderness remained, driven from territories by human intrusion. Or worse, I imagined them standing ground, defending territories the way the creature in this footage supposedly had. More confrontations, more kills on both sides, until one side was eliminated. History shows us how these conflicts end when humans decide a species is dangerous. Wolves were hunted to near extinction in the lower 48. Grizzlies eliminated from most of their historic range. Mountain lions persist only in areas too remote for easy human access. If Dogman were proven real and categorized as a threat, their fate would be decided not by science or conservation ethics, but by fear and political pressure. The comment sections reflected this division. Some celebrated hunters as brave men who removed a dangerous predator. Others condemned them as destroyers of something rare and potentially intelligent. Arguments devolved into name-calling and threats. Several people claimed to have identified hunters and posted what they said were real names and addresses, quickly removed by moderators. The controversy had taken on its own life, becoming less about the footage itself and more about larger questions of how we relate to the wild and unknown. I returned to Dogman folklore looking for context. Indigenous traditions described beings existing before the current age, survivors from when the world was different and boundaries between species more fluid. Some traditions held these creatures were neither fully animal nor spirit, but something in between, beings moving through both realms. They were guardians of deep places, forests and lakes, and caves humans were not meant to enter. To see one was often interpreted as a warning to turn back, to respect boundaries set long before human memory. Modern witnesses often describe intelligence during encounters beyond typical animal awareness. Creatures seem to understand human technology and avoid it deliberately. They recognize cameras and either flee or destroy them. They avoid roads during daylight but cross at night when traffic is minimal. They seem to understand property boundaries and stay within wild lands. When encountering humans, their behavior suggests assessment rather than blind aggression. They watch, they evaluate. They make decisions about whether to flee or stand ground based on factors we can only guess. If these creatures possess intelligence, then killing one becomes not just destruction of a rare animal, but something closer to violence against a sentient being. This is where ethical questions become most difficult and important. We protect endangered species through laws and conservation programs, but protections are based primarily on rarity and ecological importance. If a species is also intelligent, if it has culture and communication and perhaps self-awareness, do our responsibilities change? Should they change? I thought about the hunters in the footage and wondered if these questions occurred to them at all. Had they considered they might be killing something that could think and feel and understand its own mortality? Or had they seen only an animal, large and dangerous, something to be conquered and displayed? The smiles suggested they had not grappled with any moral complexity. They had simplified the situation to basic terms and celebrated their success. The footage continued circulating through winter and into spring. It became reference material in Dogman discussions, cited by believers as the best visual evidence, and by skeptics as prime examples of how easy it is to fool people with ambiguous clips and compelling narratives. New analyses appeared regularly, each claiming to prove either authenticity or fabrication. None were conclusive enough to settle the debate. The footage existed in strange limbo, too detailed to dismiss casually but too controversial and poorly documented to accept without reservation. Another year passed. The footage became old news, referenced occasionally but no longer dominating conversation. I moved on to other research, other cases, other witnesses with stories, but I kept the files. I checked periodically for new information. I remained alert for any indication hunters might break their silence. I held on to thin hope that someday we would have answers, that ambiguity would be resolved one way or another. What haunted me most was the thought that if the footage was real, the body of this creature was rotting in an unmarked grave somewhere in Michigan wilderness. It had lived for years, possibly decades, surviving in margins of human civilization. It had learned our patterns, avoided our cameras, adapted to our presence. It had done everything right from a survival standpoint. And then it had been reduced to meat and bones buried in dirt, remembered only through footage most people did not believe, and even believers could not definitively prove. I imagined the moment of the kill from the creature's perspective. It had approached bait cautiously, aware of danger but driven by hunger or perhaps challenge of stealing food from humans it learned to avoid. It had circled, assessed, made what it thought was a safe approach. Then shots came, multiple impacts no amount of strength or intelligence could defend against. It had fallen knowing it was dying, feeling life drain from its body, perhaps understanding in those final moments it had made a fatal miscalculation. The hunting season came around again that fall. I watched Dogman forums and social media carefully, looking for any indication other hunters might be planning similar expeditions. I found concerning posts, people discussing the footage and speculating about locations and tactics. Some talked openly about wanting to be the second group to claim a Dogman kill, to prove it was not a fluke. Others discussed potential monetary value of a body or good footage, suggesting financial motivation might drive future kills even if trophy hunting did not. I tried countering these discussions where I could, posting about ethical implications and potential legal consequences of killing an unrecognized species. Many in the cryptid community pushed back against hunting Dogman, arguing that even if defensive kills might be unavoidable, deliberately seeking these creatures with intent to harm was morally indefensible. But I did not know if our arguments made any difference. People planning hunts were not necessarily active in online communities or receptive to ethical appeals. I contacted law enforcement in Michigan trying to determine whether any investigation had been opened. I spoke with conservation officers, state police, federal wildlife agents. Most had not heard of the incident. Those who had dismissed it as internet nonsense, not worth limited resources. One conservation officer told me bluntly that unless I could provide a location, a body, or names of individuals involved, there was nothing to investigate. Footage on the internet was not evidence of a crime, especially when the subject might not exist at all. The legal ambiguity was maddening. If Dogman is not a recognized species, then killing one is not technically illegal under wildlife laws. It would not be poaching or hunting out of season because there is no season for creatures that officially do not exist. The only potential charges would be related to firearms discharge in protected areas or perhaps destruction of evidence. But without a body or clear jurisdiction, even these would be difficult to pursue. The hunters had operated in a legal gray zone and they probably knew it. I began seeing the footage differently as time passed. Initially, I viewed it primarily as evidence, potential proof of Dogman existence needing authentication or debunking. But I came to understand it as something else, as a cultural artifact revealing how we think about the wild and unknown. The fact some celebrated the kill while others condemned it showed deep divide in how humans relate to nature. Some see wild places and creatures as resources to exploit, challenges to conquer, threats to eliminate. Others see them as having inherent value beyond utility to humans, deserving protection and respect. These perspectives have shaped human history and continue shaping our present. They determine which species we save and which we allow to vanish. They guide policy decisions about land use and conservation. They influence individual choices about how to behave when encountering wildlife. The alleged Dogman kill footage had become a flashpoint for these larger debates, a case study in what happens when the rare and unexplained comes into direct conflict with human activity. I have come to believe the truth of what happened matters less than what the footage represents. It shows us confronting the unknown with violence rather than wonder, reducing mystery to meat and trophy shots. It shows us choosing dominance over coexistence, proof over preservation. Even if the clip is fake, the impulse it represents is real, the desire to conquer and claim rather than observe and respect. And that impulse is what will doom us in the end, not just in our relationship with dogmen if they exist, but with every wild thing that remains in this world. We are losing species faster than we can count them. We are destroying habitats faster than we can map them. We are pushing into last wild places with roads and development, leaving less and less room for creatures that need space to survive. Dogman, real or imagined, represents everything we have not destroyed yet, everything that still hides from us in deep forests. And our response when we finally find these hidden things is too often to eliminate them and smile for the camera. I think about the creature in that footage, lying on forest floor with hunters standing over its body. I think about the last moments of its life, shots tearing through it, impact driving it down. I think about whether it understood what was happening, whether it felt betrayed by its own caution, failing at the critical moment. And I think about all the other dogmen that might exist, watching from shadows as we destroy their habitats and hunt their kind, learning that hiding is not enough anymore. What will they do when hiding fails? Will they fight back, creating conflict that will justify more hunting? Will they flee to territories that cannot support them, slowly starving? Or will they simply vanish, populations dropping below sustainable levels until the last one dies alone somewhere in a forest being logged or developed? And we never know they are gone because we never confirmed they were there. I do not have answers. I have only this footage, and the anger it inspires, the sense we have lost something important, whether or not we can prove it existed. I look at that hunter's smile and feel grief that is hard to articulate, not just for the creature that might have died, but for what that smile represents about us as a species, about how we have decided to relate to the world and everything in it that is not us. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources has no record of any dogman kill. Federal wildlife agencies have no documentation. Scientific institutions have no body to study. Officially, nothing happened in that forest. The footage is a curiosity at best, hoax at worst. The hunters who claim to have made the kill are anonymous and silent. The creature, if it existed, is gone without leaving trace evidence science will accept. We are left with questions that have no definitive answers and debates that will continue as long as people care enough to argue. But I will say this: if you are out in forests of northern Michigan, if you are camping or hunting or hiking in areas where dogman has been reported, and if you encounter something that should not exist, something that walks upright and watches you with intelligence that feels too human, do not reach for a weapon. Do not think of it as a trophy or threat or story to tell. Think of it as a fellow being sharing this world with you, trying to survive in face of everything we have done to make survival difficult. Document it if you can do so safely. Note the time and location and behavior. Share that information with researchers who will treat it seriously, but do not hunt it. Do not track it down and kill it for proof or pride or thrill of conquest. We have taken enough from the wild already. We have pushed enough species to the brink. If dogman is real, let it remain in shadows where it has chosen to live. And if you cannot do that, if the urge to prove and conquer is too strong, then at least have the decency not to smile when you pose with the body. The footage still circulates online. People still debate its authenticity. The hunters still remain silent and anonymous. The creature, real or fabricated, still exists in digital form across thousands of servers, frozen in death or elaborate deception. I have spent hundreds of hours analyzing these frames and chasing leads that went nowhere. I have read every comment thread and every supposed insider account. I have spoken with experts and witnesses and skeptics, and I am no closer to certainty than when I first saw the footage appear online. But I am certain about this: whether this specific footage is real or not, dogman exists. Too many credible people have described too many consistent details across too many years and locations for it all to be fabrication and misidentification. These creatures are out there, living in places we have not yet completely destroyed, adapting to our presence as best they can, and they deserve better from us than to be hunted and killed and posed with like trophies. They deserve space to exist without our interference, to live their lives according to their own nature without becoming subjects of our curiosity or targets of our aggression. That is my position, formed from years of research and months obsessing over this footage. You can disagree. Many people do. But I ask you to consider what it means to kill something rare and intelligent, something that has survived by hiding from us, and to smile while you pose with its body. Consider what that says about us and what we value. Consider whether that is the legacy we want to leave. The forest where this alleged kill occurred still stands. Hikers and hunters still pass through it, probably walking within yards of where the creature died without knowing. The trees do not mark the spot. The ground shows no sign of what was buried there. Nature has moved on, reclaiming whatever disturbance the hunters made, covering evidence with new growth and falling leaves. In a few more years, even if someone wanted to find that spot, they probably could not. Maybe that is for the best. Maybe some mysteries should remain unsolved, some questions unanswered. Maybe Dogman should stay in realm of legend and story, rather than becoming specimens in labs or exhibits in museums. Maybe their survival depends on remaining just credible enough that people who encounter them cannot easily dismiss what they saw, but just deniable enough that science and government do not take official notice and act. The footage exists in permanent digital form now, distributed across the internet in ways making it impossible to erase completely. It will be referenced in Dogman discussions for years, cited as evidence by believers and as examples of credulity by skeptics. The debates will continue, new analyses will be performed, and the truth, whatever it is, will remain frustratingly out of reach. I look at that footage one more time. The creature lies still in leaves and dirt. The hunters stand with weapons and smiles. The forest surrounds them, indifferent and eternal, already beginning work of reclaiming what has fallen. And I think about all the other creatures we have killed without understanding what we were destroying, all the species we have driven to extinction before recognizing their value, all the wild places we have consumed in the name of progress and profit. We can do better. We must do better. The footage of this alleged Dogman kill should serve as a warning about what happens when we approach the unknown with violence and hubris. Whether real or fake, it documents a failure of human wisdom and compassion. It shows us at our worst, celebrating destruction and displaying our trophies without shame or second thought. And it challenges us to choose differently when we encounter the next mystery, the next creature that defies our categories and demands that we expand our understanding of what is possible. The Dogman in this footage is either dead or never existed. The hunters are either guilty of a profound wrong or creators of an elaborate fiction. The truth is either buried in a Michigan forest or hiding in plain sight in pixels and shadows of doctored frames. I do not know which, but I know how I choose to respond, with anger at the trophy mentality and grief for what might have been lost, with determination to do better if we ever get another chance. For more content like this, consider subscribing to the channel.